Alright, welcome to my first video on equations, and in this video we're going to focus on equation balancing. A couple of clues I've written. As you go through and balance equations, there's some things I want you to remember, and I've written those in the upper right hand corner of the screen, and I'll reference those as we go through as I balance these equations that you see on the left. First one is you don't want to change subscripts. We've written these formulas based on the rules we've learned previously. For instance, water is H2O because hydrogens are +1 each and oxygens are -2. So some folks might say, well, why don't I just make this H2O2 and then that fixes it, right? I've got 2 here, and I can do that. But you can't, because this isn't the formula for water. You cannot change as you balance. You cannot change the subscripts because we've already determined those based on the formulas or the charges for the formulas. The only thing I can do is write coefficients in front, and that will affect other things. Like for instance with this one, I have H2 here. I have H2 here. So my hydrogens look good, but now when I get to my oxygens, I have 2 here. To get to here, again, you can't change that. I have to put the 2 in front, the coefficient. Unfortunately now, my hydrogens, which were okay, I've now altered. So then I have to go back and fix it by putting a 2 here. So you'll notice with balancing there's a lot of back and forth. But if you follow these rules, generally they help you. Now that first one we just talked about, don't change the subscripts. You can't do that. You can only do coefficients in front. Some of these others will help us as we go. One of them is to balance single atoms first. What I mean by that is if you have calciums here and calciums here, do those first as opposed to say O's, H's. You have those here and you have them in more than one place over here. In this one you have O's here, you have them in 2 different places over here. Balance the other things first. And you'll notice I've written O's and H's last because oftentimes in equations those are the atoms that appear in multiple places. You'll see O's and H's oftentimes in several different places as you balance. So I recommend generally doing the single atoms, and by single atoms I mean those atoms that appear in one formula on the left and one formula on the right. Do those first. Treating polyatomic ions as single units, I'll show you in a second, but that will be something like this. If you recognize NO3s on the left and NO3s on the right, rather than treating them as a nitrogen and 3 oxygens, say, all right, listen, I have 2 NO3s here, so to balance I can do a 2 here. That gives me 2 NO3s. Now that gave me 2 NAs, but notice, I have 2 NAs. I have 1 SO4, I have 1 SO4. Notice how easy that was compared to, say, if I did it slightly differently. If I said, all right, listen, I have 6 oxygens plus 4 here gives me, 10? I have 7 over here. How can I fix that? It gets a lot more complicated, whereas just by simply just recognizing that, I put a 2 there and I'm done, and that one's already balanced. So that's what I mean by this one. You'll see this one as we go. The doubling the odd numbers to make them even, I'll show you with this one, the second one, and this one helps a lot too. If I start, again, notice I'm going to save the O's for last because they appear in several places. So let's start with the C's. I have 2 here, so I'm going to start by putting a 2 here. So I'm good there. The problem is now I have 6 H's, so if I put a 3 here, now notice my oxygens. On this side I have 4 oxygens plus 3. I have a total of 7 oxygens on the right side. You can't get 7 oxygens because you can't do 3.5. It needs to be whole numbers. So what I'm referencing here is if you double the odd numbers and make them even, by that I mean double everything I've done so far. And so this goes from 1 to a 2, which means this, instead of a 2, is now a 4 because I have 4 carbons. And now that I have 12 hydrogens here, if I'll put a 6 here, I now, instead of having 7 oxygens on this side, I have 8. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 6, I have 14. So I have, by doubling everything I've done already, I now have an even number. And in equations like this, and these are often with combustion, with combustion reactions, you're going to have this happening with oxygen. So what I can do is put a 7 there, which that does give me 14 oxygens. So now the whole thing works out. Let's go to this next one. I have calcium and calcium. So there's 1 and 1, I'm fine there. 2 hydrogens. I have 2 hydrogens here, but I also have 2 here. And so I have to make the atoms on both sides balance out. That's what equation balancing is. So what I would do here is say, all right, listen, to get 4, I'm going to put a 2 there. That gives me my 4 hydrogens. It also gives me 2 oxygens, and everything's taken care of itself. So notice how I did some of the other elements first, and just everything kind of takes care of itself. We've already addressed this one. Now here's kind of a complicated one. I've got H's here that look okay to begin with, so we're fine there. Sulfurs look okay to begin with. I've got 1 and 1. Oxygens, this is going to be a little complicated here with the oxygens. I have 4 here, 2 here, so I have 6 on the left side. I have 5 on the right side, so that's going to be a little bit trickier. So I'm left with my leads. Well, if I look at my leads, and this is where I'm at now. Again, I've done everything that's a single on both sides. So let me start with these guys that are multiple places. Well, I have 2 leads, so very quickly I can put a 2 here, which will fix the leads. That gives me 2 S's, and notice I'm going to go back now and do these elements that are in single places on both sides. So the sulfur's here and only here, so let me fix that right away. So I have a 2 there. So that's now kind of fixed. The hydrogens, I have hydrogens in one place here, hydrogens in one place here. Even though I said do those last, it depends on the formula. Oftentimes O's and H's are last, but not always. In this case, I only have H's here and here, so again, I'm going to fix that by putting a 2 here. Okay, so now to continue this, if you finish along and look, I have 4 H's here, I have 4 H's here, I have my 2 leads, I have 1 SO4. Notice I'm treating this polyatomic as a single unit. I have an SO4 here and an SO4 here. It makes counting a little bit easier. I have 2 O's here. I'm sorry, didn't mean to write all that on there. I have 2 O's there, and I've got 2 O's here. So everything's balanced. So that one worked out rather well. Now coming down here, again, I have a situation where I do have a polyatomic ion. This is called an acetate ion, and I have one over here. Again, you can see I have O's here and here, 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 and here, all over the place. So I'm definitely going to do those last. But one of the things I can also do to make my life a little bit easier is recognize that's an acetate and recognize that's an acetate. So I'm not going to count that as far as my O's and so forth. So let's go through and see what I have. I have H's here, HCO3 here, so I have 2 H's. Let me come over here, not counting the acetate, I have 2 H's, so that looks okay. Na, I have 1 there, 1 there. I have a C, I have a C. I have 3 O's, 1. Oh my goodness, this is balanced. And so when you initially look at this might look very complicated, but it ends up it's already balanced. It makes it kind of nice because you have, by treating the acetates as a single thing, it makes your life a little bit easier as far as the balancing. And now for this last one, again, very complicated. I have a lot of things in a lot of different places. Are there any clues I can use? And again, you'll see right off the bat, I'm going to save those O's for a little bit later because look how many places they're in. The H's, not so much because they're only in one place and one place. So let me do everything but the O's and see how we do. Just start with the Na's. I have 1 here, but I have 2 over here. And by the way, please notice I do not have SO4s on both sides. Even though I have a polyatomic ion here, the sulfate ion, I don't have it over here, so I can't use that to help me. So anyway, so I have these 2 NAs, so I'm okay there. That gives me 2 CLs. Why don't I go ahead and fix that a while? I'll put my 2 CLs there. H's, I do have 2, and I have 2 there, so I'm okay. And is that I think that's everything except the O's. So let's check the O's. I have 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, I have 8 here, so that doesn't work out very well. So this is one of those problems that can become a little bit more complex for folks. How do I address this? Well, what I would do right off the bat is I clearly am going to need more oxygens because I already have 5. So let me just start by kind of doing everything I did before, but let me just start by putting a 2 here. Let's just get some more oxygens on this side. Let me then go back and do all the single things again and see if that helps. So just putting a 2 there gives me 8 oxygen. So I have kind of a chance. I have more on this side. So as I fix the other things, maybe it'll correct itself. So let me go back. Now I have 4 NAs. So I'm going to have to get rid of this. We'll put a 4 here. So that fixes the NAs. But again, in the process, I've messed up the CLs. So let me come back. I'm going to put a 4 here. Scribble that out. I'll put a 4 there. That gives me 4 H's, so now if I come back over here, put a 2 there, and if you'll notice, now I have the NAs are okay, the CL's okay, the H's are alright. My sulfurs, I've also altered them by doing this, so I'll fix my 2 S's, and so I'll put a 2 there. And so now S's are okay, H's are okay, NAs and CL's, so now let me check my O's. I've got 2 times 2, I have 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, and I have 8. And so notice, while that could have posed a real problem, by just kind of following the pattern, going back and forth, and just thinking a little bit as I go through, I was able to have it kind of solve itself for me. Now this problem I would consider a pretty challenging problem down here. and you may or may not have seen what I did there intuitively or easily. With practice, you certainly can do these things. But these guys up top were generally pretty straightforward. Fix one or two things here or there. Maybe follow this thing here where you double odd numbers to make them even, and these sorts of things work out. All right, I hope this was helpful to you, and I'll see you in the next video where I start discussing reaction types.